It was 1972. Lydia was 17 years old. After finishing high school, she entered the university, where she quickly found a girlfriend with whom she was joined at the hip. Her name was Tatiana. She was very popular among the girls because she was 4 years older than those who entered university straight after leaving school. Additionally, she was already married to a Soviet Army captain who was 11 years older than her. They came from Magadan, the farthest northeastern point of Russia. Lydia was very proud that Tatiana chose her as a friend and was jealous of the other girls. Tatiana often told her stories about her life, always referring to her husband by his last name, Makeev. For Lydia, an innocent and naive 17-year-old girl, the most impressive thing was how confidently Tatiana talked about sex, as if it were something ordinary. She seemed to have all the answers and talked about sex like a cup of tea, while Lydia's face burned with shame as she worked up the courage to ask her deepest questions. "How often does he want to?" Lydia asked, suppressing a nervous laugh. Tatiana grinned. "He always wants to. 24 hours a day, 7 days a week." "How often do you do this?" Lydia insisted. "Depends on my mood," Tatiana answered. "What size is it?" Lydia's eyes sparkled. "The diameter is about 5 centimeters. And the length is like this." Tatiana answered, putting one fist on the other. "And there's another piece sticking out from above. Looks like a big sausage." Tatiana giggled. Lydia looked at her with a fascinated gaze. Then she folded her fists in the same way as Tatiana did, trying to understand what size it was and what it generally looked like. "How do you know so exactly? Did you touch him?" Tatiana burst out laughing. "Certainly. I put it inside me." "How do you think?" "What a nightmare," Lydia commented quietly. "But he's so big. This must be painful?" "He's not that big. Size doesn't really matter." "Well, yes, the first time it hurts, but it's nice," she added after a short pause. "And then it even becomes very pleasant." "What do you mean it hurts, but it feels good?" Lydia was surprised. "You will understand in time. I can't explain it to you," Tatiana replied. "Then why do men brag about his size?" Lydia did not let up. "Because they are fools. Instead of flailing their tongues, they should learn to use them more productively," said Tatiana. Lydia had no idea what she was talking about, and not wanting to seem stupid, she remained silent. "So how many centimeters is it?" Lydia continued the topic she started, looking at her fists folded one on top of the other. "Take a ruler and try it on," Tatiana smiled. It was funny for her to watch her friend, naive to the point of charm. Lydia took the ruler. "So, let's see." She placed her fists to measure, and Tatiana put a ruler to Lydia's fists, commenting, "About 19 centimeters." At that moment Makeev entered the room. He glanced at the girlfriends, and the next moment the whole apartment was filled with his loud cackle. "No! It's 3 centimeters longer than your fists. So you can easily suck the tip," he commented, almost crying with laughter. Tatiana threw a pillow at him. "Get out. This is women's talk." He quickly disappeared behind the closed door just as the pillow hit it, but his laughter was heard for a long time. Lydia stood in a stupor all this time. Such a shameful exposure of her intimate thoughts left her in complete shock. Tatiana looked at her friend's flushed face and said, "Don't pay attention to him." This comment brought Lydia out of her stupor. Having recovered a little from the first shock, she asked unsurely, "Tatiana, What did he mean? About sucking? Tatiana clarified. Lydia nodded. Guys really like it. Tatiana explained and looked at her friend who could not get over the shock. Don't worry about it like that. This is a matter of everyday life. You don't have to do anything if you don't like it. Lydia was silent. She received so much shocking information that despite her shyness, she understood that she had to get answers to all her questions that she could not ask anyone except her friend. This was her chance to find out as much as possible about something that no one had ever talked about. Lydia plucked up courage and asked. And you do this? I used to do it, but then I stopped. Tatiana answered casually. Isn't that disgusting? Not at all. It all depends on what you want. If you love a man, you will kiss him from head to toe. Tatiana explained. Why don't you do this anymore? Lydia continued her questioning. Because I don't enjoy it. He would do what he likes and turn away, completely ignoring my wishes. Tatiana's tone changed. It was obvious that this was a long-standing problem for her. And when I tell him what I want, she continued, he either pretends to be asleep or comments, you women are all bitches. That's why I also lost the desire to pamper him. Lydia guessed what Tatiana was talking about, but was not sure. So she decided to find out. What do you mean special to me? Tatiana hesitated for a moment and then answered. Well, what women do to themselves. Lydia looked at her without blinking. Why are you staring at me like that? Tatiana asked, looking intently at her friend. You understand what I'm talking about, right? Lydia's cheeks turned red. She shook her head and answered. No. Tatiana realized that she was afraid to confess. Come on. This cannot happen. You're touching yourself, aren't you? Lydia's heart was beating so hard that it seemed to her that not only Tatiana, but also McKeeve behind the wall could hear its beating. She shook her head again. No, come on. Nonsense. You are such a liar. Tatiana burst out laughing, seeing right through her friend and her pathetic attempts to hide the truth. Lydia was silent. This was the end of the conversation. Lydia always thought there was something wrong with her. And she couldn't do anything about it. Every night, as soon as she was alone in her bed, her hands went down her stomach under her nightgown and found that place between her legs that kept her awake at night. Her fingers lightly touched the small mound, which silently demanded the participation of her entire body to satisfy its erotic whim, always ending in a wave of painfully pleasant spasms. Every morning, Lydia swore to herself that she would never do this again. But every night she broke her vows, and she could not change it. So that's what she meant when she said it hurts and feels good, thought Lydia. McKeeve was born in 1939, before World War II. His father died tragically in battle. His mother was not able to feed two children, a son and a daughter, so she sent her son to a military school for boys, where he spent his entire childhood. His mother visited him from time to time, but never took him home. The military school provided strict discipline and decent food to its students. It also taught its students the basics, rules, and norms of communist society. However, upon graduation, the boys faced the harsh reality of communism, a world filled with corruption, bribery, and illegal activities that did not live up to the ideals they were taught in school. Many of the graduates were unable to adapt to the new reality and became addicted to alcohol, and some even committed suicide. However, McKeeve was able to adapt to this crooked world and survive. Lydia had never met military personnel, so she was glad to meet Tatiana's husband. They approached the huge building of the Law Institute, where McKeeve was already waiting for the girlfriends. Lydia saw a handsome young man with an athletic build and some indecently seductive eyes. She looked at him with curiosity, but not for long. Their eyes suddenly met and her heart began to pound. She lowered her eyes, not understanding why she felt so uncomfortable in his presence. Tatiana and McKeeve had their own apartment, and Lydia liked to come to Tatiana. They chatted a lot while preparing lessons in all subjects. Lydia usually came to Tatiana during the day, but one day they stayed until dark and it was unsafe to walk down the street alone in the dark. Therefore, Tatiana, without hesitation, called her husband. McKeeve, escort Lydia to the bus stop. Tatiana always sent McKeeve to accompany her girlfriends who stayed too late to the bus stop. McKeeve and Lydia left the apartment together and began to go down the stairs. Lydia felt very tense. Her gut feeling was telling her that something was wrong. They reached the bottom of the stairs, and McKeeve suddenly grabbed Lydia from behind, pressed her against the wall, and silently began to kiss her neck. His hands, so big, warm and strong, slid under her skirt and found themselves between her legs. His body was muscular, toned and hot, and his closeness was unbearably desirable. His lips were so wet and seductive, and his breath was hot to the point of madness. It was painfully pleasant, like a dream, but it was all wrong. It wasn't supposed to be this way. Lydia was so shocked that she silently slid to the floor. "Sweetie, what are you doing? Get up. The floor is cold, you might get sick. We will do everything standing," McKeeve said, trying to lift her from the floor. "Get your hands off me. Leave me alone." Lydia screamed, frightened by her own scream, which echoed throughout all the floors. She quickly stood up. McKeeve tried to help her, but she pushed him away, feeling his toned body under his shirt. Her body and heart, full of her yearning desires, were contrary to her mind, which was pushing her away. She so wanted to reach out and touch him and satisfy that familiar painful passion that she experienced every night. Was this the pain Tatiana was talking about? Lydia wasn't sure, but the sensation was both painful and pleasant. With all her might, she forced her legs to carry her out of the entrance and ran towards the bus stop. McKeeve, smiling, slowly followed her and made sure that she got on the bus safely. Lydia was too young, honest and naive to know what to do. The next day she approached Tatiana and said with acclaim, "Tell your husband to keep his hands to himself, otherwise our friendship will end." "You pervert!" Tatiana yelled at her husband. "Why did you pester Lydia?" What are you talking about? Tatiana. McKeeve's face expressed incredible surprise, as if nothing had really happened. "Tatiana. She just slipped down the stairs and I helped her up. Don't even try to make a fool out of me. I know you. Why did you put your hand between her legs? Don't you dare touch her. She is only 17 years old, she is still a virgin. You old fart." McKeeve was amazed. For the first time in his life he met a virgin. Really? Seriously? Virgin? I had no idea she was so young. Why do you make such young girlfriends for yourself? What do you mean by this? That you didn't know she was underage and that's why you started pestering her? Tatiana shouted, waving a wooden spoon in her hand. I didn't even lay a finger on her, I swear. He said, still smiling and not showing any signs of concern. It was an accident. I was just trying to help and my hand slid onto her leg, but I didn't mean anything by it. Trust me. He grabbed her hand and the wooden spoon stopped moving. Tatiana, you know how much I love you. Such dirty thoughts never enter my mind. He pulled his wife towards him. slid towards her leg or towards her vagina. Tatiana did not calm down. "You son of a bitch!" But it was absolutely impossible to argue with him. He picked her up in his arms, laid her on the sofa, pulling off her clothes, and Tatiana could no longer resist. Later, sensing the right moment, McKeeve approached Lydia. "Sweetie, you shouldn't have told Tatiana. I didn't offend you or cause you harm." "Yes, you did," Lydia said with her eyes downcast. Her face was burning with embarrassment. "No, I didn't offend you. I just offered you have a little fun. That's all. You didn't want to. It's your choice. But Tatiana doesn't need to be told this. Don't touch me and I won't say anything. I won't touch you. I promise. I'm sorry I did this. I had no idea you were a virgin." "Amazing! This is the first time this has happened to me." Lydia turned pale. Why did she tell him this? She thought with annoyance. "But know this," McKeeve continued to broadcast. "When you are ready, let me know and I will take you to the land of happiness." He touched her shoulder gently, and a painful, agonizing sensation began to ache inside her stomach again. McKeeve never touched her again, but at the same time he never stopped offering her his services to take her to the land of happiness. This incident should have been a lesson for Tatiana, but she continued to do the same to her other girlfriends. She invited them to her home. Then they stayed up late and she ordered McKeeve to walk them to the bus stop. Lydia knew this but remained silent, deciding that it could cause a quarrel between her and her friend. In addition, she understood that if she exposed McKeeve, it would not make either him or Tatiana happier. McKeeve loved women and never missed a chance for a fleeting affair. However, he was still a good husband, so over time Lydia began to perceive his adventures with women as a kind of hobby. Tatiana had no idea what her husband was doing. And occasionally, when she somehow found out that he had a new affair, she got upset and confided in her friend. Lydia listened attentively and tried to console her. "Tatiana, you know that he loves you. He is a good guy. He's not going to leave you. You never know who writes to him. He is a handsome guy. Women may have different fantasies. No worries. I'm sure McKeeve won't do anything to make you worry." And it helped. Nothing could stop McKeeve from fucking women left and right. Lydia decided that the only way to help her friend was to keep silent about his numerous sexual relationships. One day another friend, Tina, came to visit Tatiana. Tina loved to stay late. And as usual, when she was getting ready to go home, Tatiana called her husband. "McKeeve, take Tina to the bus stop." The front door closed behind them. And Tatiana began to collect the textbooks they studied from in a pile. Suddenly she saw Tina's notebook, which she forgot to take with her. Tatiana opened the window and looked outside, waiting for McKeeve and Tina to tell her about the notebook when they left the entrance. She waited, but no one came out. After waiting a little more, she left the apartment and called the elevator. After 30 seconds, the elevator doors opened and Tatiana froze in shock. In the elevator stood Tina with her skirt raised and her bare bottom raised up, looking at McKeeve with both holes, and McKeeve with his pants down and his cuckoo sticking out, ready for action. McKeeve looked at his wife, said, "I beg your pardon," and, as if nothing had happened, pressed the elevator button. The elevator doors closed. Tatiana stood in front of the closed elevator, completely stunned, not knowing what to do. A few moments later, she returned to her apartment and stopped in the middle of the hallway. Her thoughts were racing with confusion and anger. "I'll catch up with them. I'm going to kill him. A Tina. It's called a friend. Bitch! Tatiana screamed to herself. She was looking for a suitable curse for her friend. And for her husband. But she couldn't come up with anything and tears flowed from her eyes. Well, I'll pack my things and fly to my mother in Magadan. She thought. What about the university? I'll transfer. We wanted to make a baby. Oh, you're such a bastard. But how? Suddenly the front door opened, McKeeve entered the apartment and, as if nothing had happened, walked past Tatiana into the living room and sat down in front of the TV. Tatiana followed him with her eyes and threw Tina's notebook, which she was still holding in her hands, at him. The notebook flew towards McKeeve, but hit the door frame and fell to the floor. McKeeve didn't even notice this, or pretended not to notice. Tatiana entered the living room. She was seething with resentment and betrayal. Do you want to explain? She asked her husband. About what? He continued to watch TV without even turning his head, as if Tatiana had asked some everyday question and was distracting him from watching the television program. What do you mean, about what? She began to boil even more. About what I just saw in the elevator. She said in a breaking voice. What did you see in the elevator, darling? Asked McKeeve in such a tone, as if he really didn't know what was going on. He turned his head just a little, continuing to look at the TV screen. What? You fucked my friend in the elevator 2 minutes ago. Tatiana's throat was dry because she squeezed out every word with great effort. She almost started crying again. McKeeve suddenly turned around and looked at his wife with absolutely stunning surprise. Which friend? He raised his eyebrows. Tina! Tatiana screamed at the top of her lungs, so that the glass in the sideboard rang. She was so angry and shocked by his reaction that the tears that were about to fall from her eyes dried up. Darling, what are you talking about? You imagined it. I accompanied Tina to the bus and came back. His eyes shone with incredible innocence. What the hell are you talking about? I just saw you in the elevator. She was seething with indignation. My girl! Please, calm down. I don't know who you saw there, but it definitely wasn't me. This was you. Tatiana gasped in a fit of rage. Baby, it wasn't me. It was either your imagination or you confused me with somebody, and I know why. McKeeve was on a roll. You always find an excuse to avoid sex. And here is the result. You miss sex and you're hallucinating about it. What? I'll show you hallucinating. You will regret these words. She screamed and tried to attack him with her fists. But McKeeve was a professional boxer and wrestler. In addition, he was a professional lawyer, and he knew that until you admit guilt and the accuser has no evidence, you are considered innocent. Tatiana didn't know what to say or how to get him to admit what he had done. She was speechless and unable to prove or accuse him. McKeeve smiled his charming smile and extended his hand to her. Come to me, baby. She wanted to hit him, but he grabbed her hand and pulled her towards him. How could I fuck Tina if I want you so much? He pressed his hard flesh against her and the conflict was resolved. McKeeve knew how to silence his wife and he did it well. But the picture that Tatiana saw that evening while standing in front of the elevator did not leave her head. Contradictions tormented her. Of course, she didn't want to go to Magadan and leave her beloved husband, but how could she live with what she saw herself? Or maybe she really imagined it. Well, no. She's not crazy. Or maybe. Tatiana found consolation in telling her young friend Lydia about the recent incident. You can't even imagine what a terrible manipulator he is. He behaved in such a way that our relationship did not suffer in any way. And I seem to be angry with him, and it seems like I'm not. And I myself don't know what I saw there." Lydia listened without blinking. Her face showed no emotion. When Tatiana fell silent, she asked casually, "Maybe you really imagined it?" Lydia could hardly restrain her smile and the desire to laugh, imagining McKeeve, who had the audacity to look his wife in the eyes with an expression of complete innocence and declare that she imagined what she saw, because she does not have sex with him often enough. "Are you serious? You think I'm crazy?" Tatiana said with a terror in her voice. "Well, think logically," Lydia squeezed out, choking from an impending fit of laughter. "If you saw McKeeve with his pants down and a fun stick sticking out, and Tina stood in the pose of a drinking doe with a bare bottom, and he said that it seemed to you, then my question sounds completely logical." Finally, Lydia couldn't stand it and laughed hysterically. Tatiana threw a notebook at her friend, from which Lydia dodged and fell onto the carpet next to the fallen notebook, continuing to laugh uncontrollably. Tatiana looked at her for a few moments, then bent down to pick up the notebook, but Lydia grabbed her friend and dragged her onto the carpet, infecting her with laughter. So the two girlfriends rolled on the floor laughing until their stomachs hurt. And nothing happened. The McKeeve and Tatiana lived amicably and happily, and after a few months Tatiana almost forgot that anything had happened at all. Lydia had been friends with Tatiana for 3 years when Tatiana told her that she was pregnant. Since her relatives lived far away, Lydia turned out to be the only person Tatiana could rely on. It was my 3rd year of study at the university. The young women were busy with homework, tests and exams, and did not notice how 9 months flew by. McKeeve called Lydia and said that Tatiana was in the hospital and that she had given birth to a boy. In the former Soviet Union, visitors were not allowed into the hospital, but they were allowed to give food to women in labor. Lydia came to Tatiana's apartment to help McKeeve prepare a package for Tatiana. By this time, Lydia had gotten used to McKeeve and he no longer embarrassed her as before. He was certainly a handsome man, and women melted when he looked at them with his bewitching smile. However, Lydia, knowing his many adventures, lost not only all interest in him, but also respect. McKeeve and Lydia were busy in the kitchen for a couple of hours to cook Tatiana a delicious lunch. When all the food was ready and packed, and it was time to leave the apartment, McKeeve suddenly blocked the front door with his huge body. "Sweetie, I need to talk to you," he said seriously. Lydia's heart skipped a beat. After that first incident, McKeeve often reminded her that he was always ready to fly with her to the city of happiness. But this time his tone was serious, and Lydia had no idea what to expect. "Okay," she said in a calm tone. "Sweetie, could you do me a favor?" he asked, and she felt embarrassment in his tone. This was something new. McKeeve was never embarrassed. "It depends on what you want to ask me," she answered and added after a short pause. "If you're hoping for a blowjob or anything like that, then forget about it," she added in a serious tone. He laughed. "I see you have matured noticeably." "I certainly wouldn't mind." "You know." "Yes, I know," Lydia confirmed. "So what did you want to ask me?" "Please don't tell anyone that we were alone in my apartment for 2 hours and I didn't fuck you. All my friends will make fun of me for the rest of my life if they find out," McKeeve said. "Okay, no problem. Although I don't know your friends, I wasn't even here, neither with you nor without you," Lydia answered smiling. "But I still want to remind you that it's not too late, we have 3 hours before the hospital closes," he said, continuing to stand at the front door and devouring the girl with his lustful eyes. "McKeeve, get out of my way," Lydia said, trying to push him away. However, this was impossible. He was too big and stood like a rock. McKeeve simply stepped aside, giving Lydia a little space so that she could pass, but so that their bodies would touch, and looking at her with a mischievous smile. "Sweetie, you can't even imagine what you're missing," he continued. "I know that you want me. Why resist and pretend when you can relax and have fun?" "McKeeve, stop it. Save your blandishments for Tina," Lydia said, shamelessly pushing herself between him and the door frame. "Sweetie, Tina no longer comes to Tatiana to do her homework." He tried again. "Not that Tina. Another one," Lydia joked. "How do you know about the other one?" McKeeve was surprised. "I didn't. But now I know." Lydia laughed. "Gotcha, lover." Tatiana and McKeeve lived in a 2-room apartment in a 5-story building. This house belonged to a military unit and therefore only families of military officers lived there. However, Tatiana's neighbor was a single mother named Kate and her 10-year-old son. It was a mystery to everyone how Kate managed to get an apartment in this building. The birth of a child gave McKeeve the right to request a larger apartment from the military committee, and soon the couple easily received a 3-room apartment. Tatiana and McKeeve moved very quickly, and another military couple, Lieutenant Vlad and his wife Olga, moved into their old 2-room apartment. It took the new family about a week to move, and then the day came when Olga decided to go to the supermarket for the first time to load her refrigerator with food. She tried to lock the front door, but the key that McKeeve gave her did not fit the lock. She tried with all her might to turn it, but she couldn't. Suddenly the neighbor's door opened, and Kate walked out onto the landing. Seeing Olga struggling with the lock, she kindly came to the rescue and locked the door with her key. "Do we have the same locks?" Olga asked in surprise. "No. I don't know. It just works sometimes," Kate answered, smiling. "I sometimes helped Tatiana when her lock jammed." And Kate quickly disappeared, going down the stairs. A couple of hours later, Olga returned home and, as she expected, her key still did not work. Olga stood in front of her door for a while, thinking about something, then she walked up to Kate's door and, hesitantly inserting the key into the door lock, turned it. The key gave in very easily. Olga slowly opened the door. From Kate's apartment there were sounds that were similar to either crying or something else, and they could not leave her indifferent. Kate carefully entered the apartment and headed towards the sounds. She walked to the door. The sound coming from the closed room was painfully familiar. She opened the door and saw Lieutenant Vlad and neighbor Kate making love with such passion that Olga even became jealous. "How dare you do this to me?" she screamed at her husband in despair. "What are you doing in my apartment?" came the second question asked by Kate. Olga ran out of the apartment onto the landing in tears, slamming the door. She inserted the key into her door by inertia, unsuccessfully trying to turn it. Lieutenant Vlad appeared at the door, hastily buttoning his trousers, with an expression of confusion and embarrassment on his face. Kate followed him. "Olga," Kate called quietly. "I don't want to talk to you, you dirty whore." Olga screamed. "I don't mind about the whore, but why immediately dirty? I'm very clean." Kate tried to joke to defuse the situation. But Olga stood with her back to her, not wanting to engage in conversation. "Listen, Olga," Kate said softly. "Stop picking the door with that key. You won't open it with this key." "What?" Olga turned around. "Well, why are you so upset? You are a strange woman. No one will take your lieutenant away from you." "Well, I rented him." "What a pity for you." "Well, he fucked me, and you take him back." "Do you provide him with sex every day?" "Of course not." But no matter how much you give to men, it's still not enough. Well, I helped him and myself, and by the way, you too. He's a sex-hungry stud. What you give to him is not enough for him. It's not a big deal. McKeeve fucked all the women in our house, and Tatiana never said a word. This key is to my door. McKeeve mistakenly confused it with mine when he had a cup of tea with me. She looked meaningfully at Olga. Here. Take your key, said Kate, placing the key in Olga's hand. I just didn't want to give it to you, because it was very convenient to come to the lieutenant when you were not at home. I'm afraid, Lieutenant, our romance with you has ended here. She kissed Lieutenant Vlad on the lips and disappeared into her apartment. Can you believe it? Olga told this story to Tatiana. Kate said that McKeeve fucked all the women in our house. And this gave her the right to sleep with my husband. She was furious. Can you believe it? Tatiana retold this story to Lydia. Olga caught her husband in Kate's bed. And Kate, trying to justify herself, stated that McKeeve slept with all the women in our house. Like, this gives her the right to sleep with the lieutenant. And naive Olga believed the slut. She thinks that if her husband is cheating on her, then McKeeve is the same. What strange women! Can you believe it? Lydia retold this story to McKeeve, seizing a convenient moment alone with him. Olga caught her husband in Kate's bed. What a bitch! Exclaimed McKeeve with a note of jealousy in his voice. Yes, this time it wasn't you, McKeeve. Lydia commented. No, it wasn't me. Kate, in her defense, told Olga that you fucked all the women in your house when you lived there. Oh. Really? McKeeve replied with a touch of pride. I'm wondering, did you fuck only those women who lived in your house, or did you manage to serve all the visitors? Not everyone, McKeeve laughed. I still haven't served you, my sweet. McKeeve, please save your sweet one for Tina. Lydia said. Tina doesn't come to us anymore, he answered. Not this Tina, another one. She laughed. She doesn't come either, he said, smiling. I have to tell you, Lydia. You are a very good friend. You remain faithful to your friendship for so many years, despite the fact that you always wanted me. What makes you think that I always wanted you? Lydia laughed. Don't make a fool of me, girl. It was always written on your face. You were too young to hide it from me, and you are the only woman I know with whom I have never had sex. I will never get tired of offering you my services, although I already realized that this is unlikely to happen. Oh, come on, McKeeve. Due to your age, you need to buy glasses. If you had glasses, you would see that my face has long been devoid of such feelings. Well, yes. I've already seen this lately. But I'm still good. Do you want to make sure? I don't need to convince myself. Tatiana told me that you are not as good as you promise. Therefore, I have great doubts that I will receive the expected pleasure from you. Did she tell you that she was unhappy? Well, yes. Lydia! This is only because I saved all the best for you. He wanted to touch her shoulder, but didn't have time. McKeeve! Keep your hands closer to your 19 centimeters, please. Otherwise it will hurt them. She warned him with a cheerful giggle. Sweetie, he's not 19 centimeters, but longer. True, said McKeeve. Let's measure it together. Lydia laughed. McKeeve, it's time to change the records. Firstly, I am already past the age when I measured my fists. And most importantly, I trust Tatiana. If you are not able to make your wife, with whom you have lived together for so many years, happy, then nothing good will come from you. Lydia met a guy from another city and soon married him. The wedding was very modest, only for relatives, after which they left for the city of her now husband. Lydia's husband was an engineer, not tall, of ordinary build, a very friendly and hospitable young man. Some time passed, Lydia and her husband settled in a new place, and she invited her friend Tatiana to visit her. Lydia was surprised when Tatiana arrived not alone, but with McKeeve. Tatiana and Lydia immediately retired, leaving the men to talk to each other. After some time, their conversation was interrupted by Lydia's husband, who whispered in her ear that McKeeve was not in a good mood. The women returned and immediately noticed that McKeeve, who was sitting at the polished table, had made a huge scratch on the table with a knife. Everyone's mood immediately deteriorated. Lydia and her husband recently spent a lot of money on new furniture, which McKeeve deliberately ruined. The McKeeves did not stay as guests for long and soon left. The young couple were at a loss, not understanding why McKeeve did this. Tatiana was terribly ashamed of her husband. McKeeve showed no emotion and avoided looking anyone in the eye. Lydia no longer invited her friend to her home, but occasionally visited her herself. On the next visit, while Tatiana was busy in the kitchen preparing something for everyone to eat, McKeeve sat down next to Lydia and started his old song, but in a new way. "How are you, sweetie?" "Amazing," she replied. "It can't be. You don't love your husband at all," McKeeve said confidently. "Are you serious?" Lydia was surprised. "Absolutely," he replied. "And why in the world you think so?" Lydia asked, raising her eyebrows. "I remember how thrilled you were when I occasionally touched you." "Because I'm a real man. And your husband is a worm on a stick," McKeeve answered with envy. "Oh. So that's it. Now I understand the reason why you ruined my polished table. You've been jealous of my husband and decided to take revenge on him for the fact that you didn't get me first. You are pathetic, McKeeve." Lydia looked into his eyes contemptuously. "Not a single woman refused me," said McKeeve. "And sooner or later you will still be mine." "Oh. Really? You are thick-head," Lydia exclaimed. "You, McKeeve, disappointed me. It always seemed to me that you were a smart guy, because you graduated from the military academy and law school. But it turned out that you are a primitive fucker who is not even able to serve his wife as she deserves. And you behave like a teenage schoolboy whose teacher gave him a bad grade and in retaliation he smeared glue on her chair." He grinned. "Woman," McKeeve said smugly. "What do you understand, girl? You don't know what you're giving up. Why do you think women just fall for me?" "No, McKeeve. Women do not just fall for you because you are special, but because there are fewer men than women in our country. And women sometimes just want to touch a man's body, so they rush at men like you, who are constantly looking for adventures on their pet. Besides, men in our country are not educated, including you. All or almost all men think that a man is already good because he has a dick and this is enough to make a woman happy. In fact, most women are sexually unsatisfied because men do not know how to satisfy them, and therefore women look for adventure on the side. And again, you are always ready to fuck them. You don't care, as long as there is a hole, even a keyhole, even a hollow in a tree. You don't know the difference between a tree and a woman. And that's why you fuck everyone like a stray dog. If you were more attentive to one woman, she would give you so much pleasure that you would no longer have the desire to look at other women." "And why did you come to such a conclusion?" McKeeve asked, looking with surprise at Lydia, who not so long ago was in awe just because he was standing next to her, and now she was so calmly and with superiority scolding him like a boy. "I already told you. But you ignored it. So I'll tell you again. Not for you, but for the sake of my friend. Despite your tremendous experience in fucking women, you are not able to satisfy your wife. I, as your wife's closest friend, recommend that you train your middle finger and use it instead of your traditional method. Your traditional method is good for one-day butterflies, but if you want your wife to drag you into bed and always have delicious and freshly prepared food on your table, then listen to my advice." Several weeks have passed. Tatiana called her friend on the phone and answered the usual question, "How are you?" excitedly. "You have no idea what is happening here." She was out of breath. "God! So what happened?" Lydia got worried. "No. Everything is fine, and even better than fine. I think McKeeve fucked some woman." "So is this good news?" Lydia was surprised. "Excellent this time," Tatiana answered. "Okay," Lydia said. "This is getting interesting." "Well, tell me." "McKeeve is. He is so. Tatiana couldn't explain anything clearly out of excitement. "What happened? Tell me already. What did you find there?" "No. I didn't find anything." "So what makes you think that he fucked someone?" "Because this woman taught him how to use his middle finger. I had such a night that my whole body is in pleasant pain." Lydia laughed. "So that's it. And he did all this using only one finger? Well done, McKeeve. Finally. Not even 10 years of your marriage have passed. That's what am I talking about? It's just crazy. I am so grateful to the woman who taught him to do this. Life has become beautiful and amazing. I can't." Tatiana suddenly fell silent. "Hello, Tatiana. Where are you?" "Oh, Lydia. I have to go. McKeeve is calling me. Talk to you later. Bye." "Bye then. I am glad for you." Lydia answered laughing into the receiver, which was already ringing with short beeps.